It would last for 100 years, but in one case it broke after just 8 days and the patient died instantly. In fact, a version of this valve never even made it onto the American market simply because the authorities there were too nervous to approve it. So what did the corporation do? They began dumping the faulty valve overseas, and one of those dumping grounds was Australia.
Well, I think they should be hung, because to me it is nothing short of murder.
It's like a time bomb ticking away, just about to explode. You never know when it's going to go off, and where you're going to be and what's going to happen when it does go off. And what chances you got of survival after that? No one knows.
Have you ever seen the valve?
No, I haven't.
It was a heart valve like this that killed Beryl Moffat's husband. Could you hear that valve ticking away sometimes?
Yes, very much so at night time. Just like a little clock ticking. You could just hear that slight tick, tick, tick.
Bob Moffat had the Bjork Shiley valve implanted at the age of 44. 5 years later, he was dead.
He left home about 7 o'clock, happy, went to a meeting, and during the meeting, suddenly had no breath. And within about an hour or so, he was dead. There was no warning whatsoever.
There are many different kinds of heart valves. The only one we are talking about is the Bjork Shiley convex-concave valve. Bob Moffat was one of 900 Australians who had this valve implanted. The idea is the valve has to open and shut about 40 million times a year to keep the heart pumping. But the struts of Bob's valve cracked and his heart was flooded with blood. Was there any chance that his life could have been saved at that point?
No, none whatsoever. Once that valve had exploded, there was nothing anybody could do.
At night, do you hear it ticking?
If you listen carefully, you can hear it now.
Yeah, I can hear it now. Eric McGill also has the Bjork Shiley heart valve, and he dreads the day that it might stop ticking.
And I was told at the time that the valve I had was the best one available, and the cardiologist said it would last up to 200 years. And that sounded good to me.
We watch it!
Eric's just 34, and with a wife and 2 young boys, he's under tremendous pressure.
I don't know.
My wife works at night, and if I'm at home alone type of thing, with the boys in bed, or even if the boys are up, they're just going to see their father die in front of their eyes. And
it could be days, and it could be months. And when it does break, you have absolutely no warning. You could be sitting there like we're sitting right now, with no problems at all, and 2 minutes later you could be in trauma, dying.
If anyone knows the dangers of the Bjork Shiley heart valves, it's George Sherry. He was a supervisor at their Californian plant. He saw firsthand critical flaws in the valves.
So that this rod here, which is the life-dependent device, core of this device here, I have seen it break, fall apart, just by bending it with the hands.
What would they do if they discovered a cracked valve?
Oh, they would just reinsert it into the fixture again and try to weld over it.
George Sherry will say under oath that some cracked heart valves were even retrieved from garbage bins, polished up, and then sold.
I said, I've got to get this information out to the people that have these time bombs in them, and they really had no intention of correcting this, as I suggested.
What happened, George, when you blew the whistle?
In 1984, when I went public in Washington, D.C., with this information, all hell broke loose.
When the American Congress turned up the heat on Shiley, and then Washington's Food and Drug Administration began an investigation, they found evidence of a gross corporate cover-up over many years. Because Shiley once controlled half the world's market in heart valves, it had hidden the flaws, falsified records, and misled people.
Countless lives have been saved by these valves.
Before a congressional hearing, the man who was running the corporation, Bruce Fettel, was on the defensive.
I have anguished over the fracture problem, and I've suffered loss of life that has resulted. But I also regret that the fracture problem has overshadowed the considerable benefits of the CC valve. I believe that the valve has saved far more lives than were lost by fracture.
But they are killing us. If they put in a valve that was manufactured properly, then they can say they saved our life.
This Pittsburgh heart patient, Elaine Levinson, is so worried about her Bjork Shiley valve, she wears special IDs in case she collapses.
It's a medical alert necklace. And on the back of it, it says that I have the Bjork Shiley CC heart valve.
And you're not taking any chances. You've got another one on your wrist.
I got one on my wrist, too. I have them everywhere.
Elaine and thousands of other Americans have a Bjork Shiley valve that opens 60 degrees.
This is the valve support group.
Around 650 of that model was sold in Australia. But there's another type that opens up to 70 degrees, and it has even more problems.
The FDA turned down the 70-degree valve in the States, and when that happened, the manufacturer turned around and sold the 70-degree valve to European countries and Australia and other places in the world. I couldn't believe it. It was just, I mean, they were literally killing off people.
This is the Bjork Shiley 70-degree heart valve, made right here in sunny California. But you could never buy it here. That would be illegal, because the American government never approved this valve for sale to Americans. But it seems the rest of us don't matter as much, because this is the same valve implanted in Eric McGill's heart, in 250 Australians, in fact, and thousands of other people around the world.
It wasn't good enough for the Americans, but they're quite happy to sell it to the Australians and other countries, and they don't seem to care less about what happens to them.
It just seems as if we're not good enough. We're not as good as the American people.
Beryl's husband, Bob, had the 70-degree valve implanted in 1982.
They were using people like Bob.
Yes, just as if we were guinea pigs.
How could a company take a product and take it somewhere else, use other people as guinea pigs?
It sounds like the worst kind of hypocrisy. It's immoral, unethical, it's damn right dangerous.
It is. And it's damn right embarrassing to the American people that have to sit here and say that, yes, our, quote, companies do this, and we give them our tentative blessing, when we sure as heck don't.
Australians were indeed guinea pigs for the Shiley Company, and that happened because of a blatant lie to our federal government. In May 1981, Shiley's distributors wrote to our Federal Health Department in Canberra, and this is a copy of that letter, telling them that the 70-degree valve had been given investigational status by the American government, so the valve started going into Australian hearts. But 6 months later, our trade officials discovered that there had not been even preliminary approval of the valves. Shiley's boys had conned Australia.
Well, to me it's just murder. Manslaughter and murder. Especially when you think of, you know, how young Bob was, not even 50. And he was looking so forward to his children getting married and lots of things, and grandchildren. He just had his first grandchild. And he thought, well, this is it, you know, marvellous, and he's just not here.
Bob Moffat is one of about 400 people around the world known to have died from a fractured Bjork Shiley heart valve. But these are officially registered deaths, and many more may have gone unreported.
We act in a number of cases where people died directly as a result of fractures of the valve. Those circumstances were never reported to Australian health authorities.
Lawyer Peter Cashman is representing Australians trying to get some compensation after a recent court settlement in America.
We were treated as part of the third world at the time of the approval process. We didn't receive notification during the period when it became apparent that there were problems, and even now we're being treated as second-class citizens in relation to the compensation which this company is prepared to offer to the unfortunate victims.
It would cost Eric McGill $15,000 to replace his heart valve. He doesn't have that sort of money, and so he's asked the corporation for help.
I win.
Is Shiley offering you any compensation for what you're now going through?
So far I've been offered a $40 bracelet, and they're not offering to replace the valve at all.
Very generous.
There's no limit to the generosity.
Just relax and forget about it.
Yeah, relax and forget about it, yeah. The chances, 1 in 40 have died from it, but don't worry about it.
The Bjork Shiley convex concave valves have been forced off the market, but only after more than 80,000 people around the world had them implanted. The man who blew the whistle says many of the 60-degree valves will fail, but the 70-degree valves are a disaster.
And they, in my opinion, eventually will all fracture.
All of them.
Every person that has that 70-degree valve must, if their physical condition is such that they can withstand another operation, they must have that thing taken out.
I've got to listen for that tick all the time, otherwise, I'm in real trouble.
Does the thought of more surgery put you off?
Yeah, I've had 2 open heart operations, and, they're not pleasant operations, and then there's so many things can go wrong.
Just go ahead, no matter what. It's your life. Go and have it replaced. We've been through it, and I tell you, it's something terrible. Don't say that it's not going to happen to me. Just go ahead and do something. It's your life.